My sister abandoned her baby at 16, then came back 19 years later demanding to be called mom at his graduation. And the worst part? My entire family expected me to hand him over like I'd only been babysitting. 19 years, that's how long I raised Dylan alone. 19 years of school lunches, fever nights, homework battles, grocery store meltdowns, Christmas mornings, and bedtime stories. Then one day, my biological sister walked into a graduation ceremony holding a cake that read, "Congratulations from your real mom." What happened next made 200 people stand up and applaud a woman they had never met. It also destroyed my sister's relationship, exposed my mother publicly, and forced my family to finally hear the truth they'd ignored for almost 2 decades. But before I tell you how my son's graduation speech turned an entire gymnasium against the people who abandoned him, comment below. What makes someone a real parent? Biology or showing up every single day? And if you enjoy emotional family drama stories, betrayal, manipulation, and satisfying emotional endings, subscribe now because this story gets brutal. My name is Myra Summers. I was 41 years old when my sister tried to take back the son she gave away at 16. I grew up in Willow Creek, Ohio. Population, small enough for gossip to travel faster than weather. The kind of town where people knew your business before you did. My younger sister Vanessa was 6 years younger than me. She was beautiful in the effortless way some girls are. Big smile, perfect hair. The kind of person adults described as special before she'd even done anything. Meanwhile, I became the reliable one. Interesting title. Because reliable is what families call daughters they plan to sacrifice quietly. I drove Vanessa to dance lessons, covered for her mistakes, cleaned the kitchen while she got ready for parties, and honestly, I loved her anyway. That's the complicated thing about older sisters. Love and resentment braid together so tightly you stop knowing which feeling hurts more. Our mother Rita worshipped Vanessa openly. Vanessa was fragile. Vanessa needed protecting. Vanessa had potential. Meanwhile, I was expected to handle things. My father Gerald rarely disagreed with my mother, not because he was cruel, because he was absent in every way that mattered. I was 22 when everything changed. I had just finished my degree in education. I'd been accepted into a master's program with a full scholarship. I had plans, a timeline, a tiny studio apartment with terrible parking and one crooked window that I adored because it was mine. Vanessa was 16, sophomore year, cheerleader, dating a boy named Tyler who drove a Mustang and thought responsibility was optional. Then one night my phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning. Mom. I drove 40 minutes home through complete darkness. When I walked into the kitchen, Rita sat at the table holding cold tea she hadn't touched. Dad stood beside the refrigerator staring silently at the floor. And upstairs, I could hear Vanessa crying through the ceiling. Mom slid a photograph across the table. Ultrasound image, 4 months pregnant. I froze. 4 months? Vanessa had hidden the pregnancy for 4 months. But what I remember most wasn't the shock, it was Mom's first sentence. The neighbors cannot find out. Not, is Vanessa okay? Not, what are we going to do? Just reputation. That was always my mother's real religion. The kitchen clock ticked loudly while Dad said absolutely nothing. Then Mom calmly explained the options. Adoption agency, secrecy, cover stories, like she was planning a corporate event instead of discussing a terrified teenager's baby. Keeping it isn't possible, she said firmly. She has her whole life ahead of her. Interesting, those exact words would come back 19 years later in a way none of us expected. Then Mom walked to the hallway closet and returned holding a tiny yellow baby blanket. Soft, faded, worn thin at the corners. This was yours, she said quietly. She handed it to me. The fabric smelled faintly like cedar and dust from years in storage. Then finally, my mother looked directly at me. You have to help your sister. Not will you have to. Because in my family, love was rarely offered without obligation attached to it. The next morning, Mom made the situation brutally clear. If you don't take the baby, she said, we'll contact an adoption agency by Friday. The baby would disappear into the system. Vanessa would go back to school, and everyone would pretend none of it ever happened. I looked toward the living room. Vanessa sat curled into the couch wearing an oversized hoodie, mascara smeared beneath swollen eyes. And suddenly she didn't look irresponsible anymore. She looked 16, Scared, overwhelmed, completely lost, I sat beside her quietly. "Vanessa," I asked softly, "what do you want?" She looked at Mom first, then at me. Then down at the floor. "I just want everything to go away." Mom immediately pointed toward her. "There, you heard her, she has school." School, that word echoed through the kitchen strangely, like education mattered more than motherhood. More than responsibility, more than the baby growing inside her. I drove home later that night with the yellow blanket sitting on my passenger seat. I hadn't said yes, but honestly, in families like mine, silence was treated like agreement. 2 weeks later, I withdrew from my master's program, and 3 months after that, I became a mother. Dylan was born on July 14th at 3:17 in the afternoon. 6 pounds, 9 ounces, full head of dark hair, lungs powerful enough to shake the delivery room walls. I still remember the nurse asking, "Who wants to hold him first?" 3 women stood in that room. Vanessa turned her face toward the wall. My mother crossed her arms and checked the clock. So the nurse looked at me, and somehow before I even touched him, my life changed. I took him carefully into my arms, tiny fingers. Warm skin, eyes squeezed shut. Then his little hand wrapped around my index finger and he stopped crying instantly. Funny how some moments feel ordinary while they're happening, until years later when you realize your entire future began there. The nurse smiled softly. "Well," she whispered, "looks like he already knows his person." I nearly cried, because suddenly this wasn't just Vanessa's baby anymore. This was a child depending on me completely. Then the nurse asked the question nobody else in the room wanted to answer. "Who's taking him home?" Silence. The longest silence of my life. Dad stared at the floor. Mom looked irritated. Vanessa looked exhausted and terrified. So finally, I answered, "I am." 3 days later, I carried Dylan into my tiny one-bedroom apartment on East Willow Street. I had a borrowed crib, discount diapers, 2 bottles, and exactly $312 in my checking account. That was it. I wrapped him in the yellow blanket that first night. The same blanket that wrapped me as a baby, now wrapped around him. Like my family kept passing responsibility down through generations and pretending it was love. The first year nearly destroyed me. Dylan had colic. Every night between 8 p.m. and midnight, he screamed. Not cried, screamed. I walked circles around that apartment for hours, holding him against my chest while memorizing every crack in the ceiling. Sometimes I cried with him. Sometimes I sat on the bathroom floor whispering, "Please sleep, please sleep, please sleep." I was working as a teaching assistant during the day, then coming home to a screaming newborn every night. I learned how to survive on 4 hours of sleep. I learned how to eat standing up. I learned how fast a shower could be taken before a baby started screaming again. One night around 11 p.m., after Dylan cried nonstop for almost 3 straight hours, I finally called my mother. I stood in my kitchen wearing stained sweatpants and holding a bottle in one shaking hand. "Mom," I whispered, "I need help just for one night." There was silence on the line. Then Rita answered calmly, "You chose this, Myra, figure it out." And she hung up. That sentence changed me permanently. Because suddenly I understood something devastating. This wasn't temporary. Nobody was coming to save me. Meanwhile, Vanessa moved to Boston for college that same August. Scholarships, dorm life, fresh start. Mom and Dad helped pay tuition. Interesting. The same parents who claimed they couldn't afford Dylan's pediatrician bills somehow found money for Vanessa's future. In October, I officially became Dylan's legal guardian. The paperwork arrived in a thick envelope from Franklin County Family Court. Vanessa signed the relinquishment forms by fax from Boston during rush week. Rush week. While I was learning how to soothe a colicky infant alone at 2 a.m., my sister was attending sorority parties. I signed every document carefully, then placed them into a small fireproof safe beneath my bed. Inside that safe, the guardianship papers, Dylan's hospital bracelet, and the yellow blanket. The 3 most important things I owned. Legally, he became mine that day. Emotionally, he already was. The next few years passed in snapshots. Dylan learning to walk across our apartment living room, arms outstretched, laughing like he invented gravity. Dylan at 3 asking impossible questions during breakfast. What does vitamin deficiency mean? Dylan at 4 teaching himself to read cereal boxes. Dylan at 5 walking into kindergarten wearing a Spider-Man backpack twice his size. He didn't look back once. I sat in my car afterward and cried for 15 minutes. Because that's the cruel thing about motherhood. You spend years teaching someone independence while secretly grieving every moment they stop needing you. Nobody from my family visited during those years, not once. No birthdays, no Christmas presents, no surprise visits. Occasionally mom called asking, "How are you managing?" Never. "How can we help?" Dad mailed a $50 check once for Dylan's third birthday. No card, no note, just money, like emotional absence could be solved financially. When Dylan was 3, I wrapped his Christmas presents in newspaper because I couldn't afford wrapping paper. And you know what? He thought the comics section was the gift. That little boy laughed like we were rich. Maybe we were. Just not financially. Then when Dylan turned 6, my phone rang one Tuesday night while I was cooking spaghetti. Boston area code. Vanessa. First time she'd called in years. Her voice sounded polished now, professional. Like someone who reinvented herself completely. And do you know what she asked about? Not Dylan, not school, not birthdays, not whether he was healthy. She asked about her old car sitting in mom's garage. 42 seconds. That entire phone call lasted 42 seconds. And when she hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the wall while Dylan colored dinosaurs at the table behind me. Because honestly, that was the moment I stopped expecting my sister to ever come back for him. When Dylan was 8, he asked me a question that nearly broke my heart. We were sitting in the kitchen. I was washing dishes. He was doing homework at the table behind me, completely ordinary evening. Then suddenly, "Aunt Myra, how come I don't have a mom and dad like the other kids?" My hands stopped moving instantly. The water kept running. A plate slipped against the sink loud enough to make him flinch. Funny how one innocent question can expose every emotional wound you've been hiding for years. I turned off the faucet slowly, then sat across from him at the table. Dylan looked so small sitting there, pencil in hand, Spider-Man pajamas, eyes too observant for an 8-year-old. Children always know more than adults think they do. I took a breath carefully. "Dylan, your birth mother loves you in her own way." Even saying the sentence felt complicated. Because honestly, I didn't know if it was true anymore. "But I'm the one here," I continued softly. "And I'll always be here." He studied my face quietly for a few seconds, then finally said, "I know." And somehow those 2 words hurt worse than anything else. Because 8-year-olds shouldn't speak with that kind of emotional certainty. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Can I call you Mom instead of Aunt Myra?" I completely broke. Not dramatic movie crying, real crying. The kind you spend years holding back until one tiny sentence finally cracks you open. I cried harder than I did the night Mom refused to help me, harder than when Vanessa ignored his birthdays, harder than every lonely Christmas combined. And do you know what Dylan did? He got up quietly, walked around the table and hugged me, tiny arms, warm cheek against my shoulder. "It's okay, Mom," he whispered. First time, Mom, I held him so tightly he laughed a little. That night after Dylan went to sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the guardianship papers. My name, every signature, every legal stamp, proof that I wasn't imagining this life, proof that I earned it. Then I opened the fireproof safe beneath my bed. Inside, the yellow blanket sat folded carefully beside the paperwork. I picked it up slowly. The fabric was frayed now from years of being loved too hard. Dylan used to carry it everywhere when he was little. Grocery stores, car rides, bedtime. It smelled faintly like baby shampoo and laundry detergent. And honestly, holding that blanket felt like holding 19 versions of my life at once. Then suddenly, a tiny knock sounded on my bedroom door. Dylan stood there rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Mom, I can't sleep." Still Mom, not Aunt Myra, Mom, I smiled immediately. "Come here." He climbed into bed beside me and noticed the blanket in my hands. "That's my baby blanket," he whispered. "It was mine first," I told him softly, "before it became yours." He looked surprised by that. Then very carefully, he folded the blanket and placed it back inside the safe. "We should protect it," he said seriously. "It's important." He was only 8 years old. And somehow he already understood what nobody else in my family ever did. Love becomes valuable because of who keeps showing up, not because of biology. Years passed quickly after that. Dylan became brilliant, not just smart. Remarkable, straight A's, debate team, science competitions, advanced classes. Teachers stopped me constantly saying things like, "Gifted?" Exceptional, one of the brightest students we've ever had. And every single time I felt proud in this deep, painful way I can't fully explain. Because I remembered the tiny, screaming newborn everyone else abandoned. Meanwhile, Vanessa collected accomplishments of her own. MBA, corporate job, Chicago apartment, luxury vacations, 2 marriages, funny thing. Neither husband ever met Dylan, neither marriage lasted. And through all of it, my mother still treated Vanessa like the family success story. Every time Vanessa divorced, Mom called Emmy asking not to add stress to Vanessa's life. Interesting. The woman raising a child alone was expected to protect the emotional comfort of the woman who abandoned him. Classic family logic. Then when Dylan was 13, I finally told him the full truth. Everything. The pregnancy, the ultimatum, the adoption threat, the faxed paperwork, the years of silence. I didn't insult Vanessa, didn't poison him against anyone. I simply told the story exactly as it happened. Dylan listened quietly the entire time. Then stood up, walked into his room, and stayed there for 2 full days. I thought I'd destroyed him. But on the 3rd morning, he sat down at the breakfast table calmly and said, "I'm not angry at her." I stared at him carefully. "At Vanessa, at any of them," he answered quietly. "I just feel sad for her." Sad, he nodded slowly. She missed everything. And honestly, that sentence hit harder than any accusation ever could because he was right. Vanessa missed. First words, first steps, nightmares, school plays, birthday mornings, inside jokes, science fairs, fever nights, every ordinary little moment that actually builds a family. She missed all of it. And for the first time, I realized Dylan no longer felt abandoned. He felt chosen. When Dylan turned 15, I made the mistake of believing my family had changed. That was my first mistake. My second, taking him to Thanksgiving at my parents' house. I don't even know why I agreed to go. Maybe I wanted him to experience one normal family holiday. Maybe I wanted to believe time softened people. Maybe some small part of me still hoped my mother would finally see us as real family. We drove 40 minutes to Willow Creek together. Dylan wore a button-down shirt he picked himself. He kept adjusting the collar nervously in the passenger mirror. And honestly, watching him try so hard for people who barely deserved him made my chest ache. The house was packed. Cousins, neighbors, aunts, loud football on TV, turkey smell filling the kitchen. Perfect family performance. Mom greeted Dylan at the door with a quick hug, then immediately introduced him to relatives by saying, "This is Vanessa's son, not this is my grandson, not this is Myra's boy." Just, "Vanessa's son?" I felt Dylan's hand tighten around mine instantly. 15 years old, and he already understood exactly what was happening. Dad carved turkey, Mom poured wine. Everyone asked Vanessa about Chicago. Nobody asked Dylan about his grades, his science awards, his debate competitions, or the fact he was already testing at college level. And nobody asked me anything at all. Interesting. Families will erase your sacrifices so gradually you almost stop noticing it happening. After dinner, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while loading the dishwasher. "It was nice of you to bring him," she said casually. "Bring him. Like I borrowed him for the weekend." Then she added, "Vanessa will be happy to know he's doing well." Something inside me snapped quietly. Then maybe Vanessa should ask him herself. Mom gave me that look immediately, the one that meant, "You're being difficult again." We drove home in silence afterward. Finally, Dylan spoke first. "I don't want to go back there anymore." And honestly, I couldn't blame him. By junior year, it became obvious Dylan wasn't just intelligent. He was extraordinary, straight A's, advanced placement classes, debate captain, volunteer tutor on weekends. Teachers stopped me constantly in hallways. "Have you considered early college admission? He's one of the brightest students we've seen in years." Then one October afternoon, his guidance counselor called me into her office. "Dylan is on track to become valedictorian." I nearly stopped breathing. Valedictorian, out of more than 300 students. Then she handed me a printed copy of his scholarship essay. Title: "The Woman Who Chose Me." I read it sitting alone in my car afterward, and I cried so hard I couldn't drive for 20 minutes, because that essay contained our entire life. The yellow blanket, the tiny apartment, Christmas gifts wrapped in newspaper, homework at the kitchen table. The night he first called me Mom, then I reached the final paragraph. "Biology is an accident, love is a decision." My mother made that decision every single day for 19 years. I pressed the paper against my chest and just sat there shaking. Because honestly, that was the first time anyone had truly seen everything I sacrificed. Then 2 months before graduation, everything changed again. Dylan came home from school unusually quiet. No music, no backpack tossed dramatically onto the couch, no sarcastic comments about teachers, just silence. He walked into the kitchen slowly and placed his phone on the counter in front of me. "Mom, you need to see this." Family group chat. Mom, Dad, Vanessa, aunts, uncles. Someone accidentally added Dylan months earlier and never noticed. I started scrolling, and with every message, my stomach dropped lower. "Mom, when Vanessa is finally ready, Dylan should come back to her." Uncle Dale, Myra should be grateful she got to experience motherhood at all. Aunt Patris. Poor Vanessa, she sacrificed so much. Sacrificed. Interesting word for abandoning a child. Then I reached Vanessa's message. "Give me a few more years, I want things stable before I take him back." Take him back. Like he was borrowed furniture. Like I hadn't spent 19 years building my entire life around him. I sat there rereading the messages while the refrigerator hummed softly behind us, completely numb. Then finally I looked up at Dylan. "How long have you known?" He shrugged quietly. "A while. Why didn't you tell me?" And his answer destroyed me. "Because I didn't want you to lose your family because of me." That 19-year-old boy spent his entire life protecting my feelings. Even after everything. I walked to my bedroom that night, opened the fireproof safe, and checked every single guardianship document again. Every signature, every stamp, every legal paper. Because for the first time in years, I realized my family wasn't done trying to take from me yet. 6 weeks before graduation, Mom called pretending everything was normal. No apology, no explanation. No mention of the group chat, just, "Vanessa is bringing someone special to the ceremony." I already knew what that meant. A man, because suddenly my son had become useful to her image. Mom sounded excited in a way she never sounded about Dylan himself. "His name is Harrison Whitfield," she continued proudly. "He's very successful, real estate, traditional values." Traditional. Interesting word for a man being manipulated into believing my sister was secretly a devoted mother. Then Mom lowered her voice carefully. "This could finally be Vanessa's chance to have the life she deserves." I leaned against the kitchen counter silently. Her chance, not Dylan's chance to reconnect with biological family, not our chance to heal, Vanessa's chance. Everything always came back to Vanessa. "What exactly did she tell him?" I asked quietly. Mom hesitated. That the family situation was complicated. Complicated. Funny how manipulative people replace ugly truths with softer words. Mom continued, "Harrison really admires her sacrifice." Sacrifice, another interesting word. Because abandoning responsibility somehow sounded noble once my mother explained it. Then finally, Mom said the sentence that made my blood run cold. "Harrison wants to meet Dylan properly." Like my son was part of some presentation package. I stared out the kitchen window for a long moment, then calmly asked, "Does he know Vanessa signed away her parental rights during rush week?" Silence. Long silence. Then Mom snapped sharply. "Do not ruin this for your sister." There it was, the real priority, not truth, not Dylan, not honesty. Protecting Vanessa's fantasy. I hung up without another word. That evening, Dylan found me sitting on the porch staring at nothing. He brought 2 glasses of lemonade and sat beside me quietly. "Grandma called," I nodded. "About Vanessa?" "Yeah." He was silent for a moment, then softly said, "She's not your sister anymore, is she?" That question hurt more than expected, because honestly, I didn't know the answer. 3 weeks later, Dylan walked into the kitchen holding his phone. "She messaged me." Instagram, of course. Not a phone call, not a letter, not an honest conversation. A carefully curated social media message with heart emojis. "Hey handsome, I know this is sudden, but I'm your bio mom. I've thought about you every single day." I read the message twice, every single day. Interesting, people who truly think about you usually remember birthdays, or allergies, or favorite foods, or middle school graduations. Dylan watched my face carefully. "What should I say?" I looked at him for a long moment, then answered honestly, "That's your decision, not mine." He sat beside me quietly thinking, then typed, "Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it." Polite, cold, controlled, exactly like me. Vanessa replied almost immediately. I can't wait to see you at graduation. I'm bringing someone special I want you to meet. Red heart. Dylan locked his phone without answering. And honestly, that told me everything, because deep down, he already understood what she was doing. 6 weeks before graduation, the school officially announced Dylan as valedictorian. Highest GPA in a class of 312 students. I cried in the school hallway after the principal called me, not loud, just quiet tears while pretending to read paperwork. That evening, I asked Dylan if I could read his graduation speech. Nope, he smiled. You'll hear it with everybody else. For weeks, I heard him practicing behind his bedroom door late at night, pausing, rewriting, starting over. Something about it felt important, bigger than a normal graduation speech. Then graduation morning finally arrived. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. unable to sleep. Dylan's cap and gown hung neatly across the dining room chair. Navy blue, gold tassel. I ironed everything the night before carefully, the same way my mother taught me when I was 10 years old. Funny how we still carry lessons from people who hurt us. Dylan came downstairs freshly shaved, wearing a white button-down shirt. How do you feel? I asked. He smiled slightly. Hungry? So I made eggs and toast while sunlight poured through the kitchen window. Completely normal morning. And somehow that made everything feel even more emotional. Then right before we left, I noticed something yellow in Dylan's hands. The blanket. That tiny faded baby blanket from 19 years earlier. The one Mom handed me the night everything changed. Dylan folded it carefully and tucked it inside his graduation vest pocket. For luck, he said softly. I didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Willow Creek High School. And honestly, that parking lot felt less like a graduation ceremony and more like the beginning of a war. The gymnasium was already packed when we arrived. Rows of plastic chairs, families carrying flowers, grandparents fighting with phone cameras, teachers pretending not to panic, normal graduation chaos. But the second I walked inside, I saw them. Vanessa, Mom, Dad. And in Mom's hands, a cake, white frosting, pink lettering, gold trim around the edges. At first, I couldn't fully read it from across the room. Then Vanessa turned slightly, and my stomach dropped. Congratulations from your real mom. Real mom, 19 years, and somehow my family still believed motherhood was biology instead of sacrifice. Claire grabbed my wrist immediately. You okay? Not really, but I nodded anyway. Because honestly, I was too emotionally exhausted to fall apart anymore. Vanessa looked stunning. Emerald dress, perfect curls, professional makeup. Like she was attending a gala instead of emotionally ambushing the son she abandoned. Beside her stood Harrison Whitfield, tall. Expensive suit, silver watch. The kind of man who looked financially successful from 20 feet away. And honestly, he looked proud standing beside her. Like he genuinely believed she was some tragic loving mother finally reconnecting with her child. That part almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. Mom spotted me immediately and smiled tightly. The performance smile. The one she used whenever she wanted strangers to believe we were a happy family. Then Vanessa made her move. She walked straight toward the graduate staging area carrying that cake like a trophy. Security stopped nobody because she confidently announced, I'm Dylan's mother. Technically true, emotionally insulting. I watched from my seat while she approached Dylan in line. Then suddenly she wrapped him in this huge theatrical hug. Both arms around his shoulders, eyes closed dramatically. Perfect for photographs. But Dylan never hugged her back. His arms stayed completely at his sides. And honestly, that hurt me more than if he'd pushed her away. Because indifference means the emotional connection never existed to begin with. Then Vanessa turned and started walking toward me. Heels clicking loudly across the gym floor, smile locked in place. She stopped beside my row and leaned down close enough for nearby parents to hear. Myra, she said sweetly, thank you so much for taking care of my son all these years. My son. Not ours, not Dylan, her son. Then she placed one manicured hand on my shoulder and whispered, You've been an incredible babysitter. Babysitter, 19 years, school lunches, homework nightmares, doctor visits, science fairs. Birthday cakes, fever nights, college applications, babysitter. I felt Claire tense beside me instantly, but before I could respond, I saw Dylan watching us from the staging area, completely still, jaw tight. eyes locked directly onto mine, and somehow, without speaking, I understood exactly what he was asking me to do. Wait. So I waited. The ceremony started at exactly 10 a.m. Principal Atrix welcomed families. The orchestra played something forgettable. The superintendent gave a speech nobody listened to. Then graduates started crossing the stage one by one. Meanwhile, Vanessa recorded everything on her phone. Every time another student walked across, she lowered it. But when Dylan's name approached alphabetically, she straightened immediately, ready for her moment. Mom sat proudly beside the cake like it was evidence of something meaningful. Funny thing is, that cake became the biggest mistake my family ever made. Finally, the announcer said, "Summers, Dylan." Everything inside me stopped. Dylan walked across the stage calm and confident, cap perfectly straight, diploma in hand. Then right before stepping off the stage, he looked directly at me in the third row and winked. Small gesture, but somehow it steadied me instantly. Then the announcer said, "And now, our valedictorian address." Dylan walked toward the podium while the gymnasium applauded politely. Vanessa looked emotional already. She genuinely thought this speech was about to celebrate her, and honestly, watching her smile made what happened next even more devastating. Dylan adjusted the microphone once, then unfolded a piece of paper carefully. "Good morning," he began calmly. His voice carried perfectly through the gymnasium. Clear, confident, steady, exactly the kind of voice built by years of being listened to by someone who truly cared. The audience relaxed immediately. He started with normal graduation material. Freshman year disasters, bad cafeteria food. Teachers everyone secretly feared. People laughed. Vanessa laughed loudest, one hand resting proudly on Harrison's arm while she recorded him smiling at the podium. She really believed this moment belonged to her. Then Dylan paused, looked down at his speech, silent for 3 seconds, 5, and suddenly he folded the paper completely. The gymnasium went quiet instantly, that strange silence that happens when hundreds of people realize something unexpected is about to happen. "I wrote 9 versions of this speech," Dylan said slowly, "but this morning I realized the most important thing I want to say isn't written on any page." Vanessa straightened immediately. I saw it happen in real time. Her posture changed, smile widened slightly. She thought he was finally about to publicly acknowledge her. Then Dylan spoke again. "The person I want to thank most today is not a teacher, not a coach, not a mentor." He looked directly into the crowd. At 22 years old, she was handed a newborn baby and told, "This is your responsibility now." My chest tightened instantly. The gymnasium became completely silent. She had never changed a diaper before, Dylan continued. She had just been accepted into a master's program with a full scholarship, and she gave it up the next morning. I stopped breathing. Vanessa's smile slowly faded. "She moved into a tiny apartment and figured everything out alone," Dylan said. 4 hours of sleep, dollar store diapers, teaching assistant paychecks. The audience wasn't moving anymore. Nobody checking phones, nobody whispering. Every person in that room was listening now. "She wrapped my Christmas presents in newspaper because wrapping paper cost too much." Somewhere behind me, someone sniffled quietly. Dylan kept going. "She worked full-time while raising me alone, then went back to school at night and earned her master's degree anyway." Claire squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt, and honestly, I barely noticed because my entire body felt frozen. "She taught me how to read, how to iron a shirt, how to apologize properly, how to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye." Vanessa lowered her phone slowly. For the first time all morning, she looked nervous. Then Dylan looked directly at me sitting in the third row. "She isn't the woman who gave birth to me," he said softly. The silence became painful. "But she is the woman who chose me every single day for 19 years. I broke completely, tears, shaking hands, everything. Because suddenly, every lonely year meant something, every sacrifice, every missed opportunity, every sleepless night. Seen, finally seen. Then Dylan smiled slightly. "Her name is Myra Summers," he said proudly. "And she is my mother." The gymnasium exploded. People stood up. Teachers clapped. Parents cried openly. 200 strangers standing for a woman they'd never met. And somehow that applause sounded like 19 years of pain finally leaving my body. I looked toward Vanessa. She sat frozen in her chair, phone still recording uselessly toward the ceiling. Beside her, Harrison wasn't looking at the stage anymore. He was looking at her, really looking. Like pieces were finally connecting in his head. Then I looked at Mom, and there sat Rita Summers holding a cake that read, "Congratulations from your real mom." Except now, everyone in that gymnasium understood exactly how cruel those words really were. Dylan waited for the applause to quiet down, then he spoke one final time. "Biology makes you related," he said calmly, "but love is a decision." The entire room went silent again. And my mother made that decision every single day. Then he looked directly at me and mouthed two words silently. "Thank you." I cried harder than I ever had in my entire life. But honestly, the real destruction hadn't happened yet. Because graduation ceremonies eventually end. And afterward, families have to face each other outside. The graduation ceremony ended at 11:42 a.m. I remember the exact time because that's when my entire family's illusion finally collapsed. Parents flooded the gym floor immediately. Flowers, photographs, tears, celebration. Meanwhile, I stayed frozen in my chair trying to process what had just happened. 19 years of sacrifice finally spoken out loud in front of everyone. Claire hugged me first. "You raised an incredible man," she whispered. Then teachers approached. Parents, people I'd never met. One woman grabbed my hands crying and said, "I was raised by my aunt too. Thank you for what you did for him." Thank you, such a simple sentence. And somehow it healed wounds my family created decades earlier. Then I saw Harrison, standing beside Vanessa near the gym entrance. Except now he wasn't touching her anymore. No hand on her back, no proud smile, just distance. Interesting how quickly admiration dies once truth enters the room. Vanessa kept trying to explain something, talking fast. Hands shaking, Harrison looked stunned, like he just discovered the woman beside him was a complete stranger. Then suddenly Dylan walked straight toward me through the crowd, cap crooked, diploma in hand, eyes glassy with emotion. And without saying a single word, he hugged me, not polite hug, not quick hug, real hug. The kind that says, "I know everything you carried for me." I buried my face against his shoulder and cried again. Then quietly he whispered, "You never have to prove you're my mom again." That sentence shattered whatever composure I still had left. Because honestly, I'd spent 19 years terrified someone would someday take him emotionally away from me. But standing there in that crowded gym, I finally understood something. Nobody could undo a lifetime of love. Then Vanessa approached us slowly. And for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. No performance, no confidence. Just shame. She stopped a few feet away from Dylan. "I didn't know you felt this way," she whispered. Interesting sentence, not "I'm sorry," just surprised that consequences existed emotionally. Dylan stayed calm. "You never asked." Silence, pure silence. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears instantly. "I was young," Dylan nodded once. "I know, I didn't think Mom and Dad would actually let Myra raise you permanently." That sentence made me physically tense, because even now she still framed herself as passive, like life simply happened around her. Then Dylan asked quietly, "But once you got older, why didn't you come back?" No anger, that's what made it devastating, just honesty. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again because there wasn't a good answer. Career, relationships, freedom, convenience. None of them sound acceptable when spoken out loud to the child you abandoned. Then Harrison finally spoke for the first time. "You told me Myra temporarily helped while you got back on your feet." Vanessa's face drained instantly. Interesting, so the lies went deeper than I thought. Harrison looked genuinely disturbed now. "You said your family kept him from you." Nobody moved. Vanessa started crying harder. I didn't know how to explain it. Harrison stared at her for a long moment, then quietly asked, "Explain what? That your sister raised your son while you disappeared?" That sentence hit like broken glass. Because suddenly the story sounded exactly as ugly as it truly was. Mom rushed forward immediately. "Now hold on, this is becoming unfair to Vanessa." Of course, even now protect Vanessa first. Classic Rita Summers. Then something happened I never expected. Dad spoke. "Rita, stop." Everyone turned. Dad looked exhausted. Older somehow, like watching Dylan's speech forced him to finally see the last 19 years honestly. He looked directly at Vanessa. "You abandoned him," he said quietly. "And Myra paid the price for all of us." The entire hallway went silent because my father had never defended me before, not once. Mom looked stunned. Vanessa looked shattered. And honestly, hearing Dad finally acknowledge reality hurt almost as much as the years he ignored it. Then Dylan reached into his graduation vest pocket slowly and pulled out the yellow baby blanket. Soft. Faded, 19 years old, everyone stared at it silently. "My mom kept this my whole life," Dylan said calmly. Then he looked at me. "She kept everything?" I started crying again instantly because he understood. The blanket. The paperwork, the memories, the sacrifices, all of it mattered to him. Then Dylan folded the blanket carefully and turned toward Vanessa. "I forgive you," he said softly. Vanessa broke down completely, real crying this time, ugly crying. Shoulders shaking, but Dylan continued calmly, "Forgiveness doesn't erase absence." That sentence changed the entire room because finally someone said the truth out loud. Love cannot be backdated. You can't skip 19 years, then return expecting the emotional title someone else earned. Harrison quietly removed the ring box from his jacket pocket. I noticed it immediately. So did Vanessa. He stared at it for 1 second, then slipped it back into his pocket. And just like that, I knew the proposal was over. The fantasy collapsed right there in a crowded school hallway. 3 months later, Harrison left Vanessa. Mom stopped trying to force family reunions. Dad started visiting Dylan regularly. And for the first time in decades, people in Willow Creek finally stopped calling me the reliable daughter. Now they called me something else. Dylan's mother, and honestly, that was all I ever wanted. 1 year later, Dylan left for Stanford on a full scholarship. Before leaving, he placed the yellow blanket back into my hands. "You keep it," he smiled. "You're the one who earned it." I still keep that blanket folded carefully inside the fireproof safe beside his guardianship papers, not because I'm afraid someone will take him away anymore, but because it reminds me of something important. Real parenthood isn't biology, it's sacrifice, consistency, presence. It's choosing someone every single day, even when nobody thanks you for it. Before you go, comment below. Should biological parents automatically deserve the title mom or dad, even after abandoning their child? And if this story hit emotionally, subscribe for more powerful family drama stories, betrayal, manipulation, and satisfying emotional endings from sad drama stories.